The ocean is as mysterious as it is endless, a world of waves hiding stories that defy explanation, true stories that make us question what we really know about the deep. There are underwater ruins so precise they couldn't possibly be natural, ships that vanished without a trace, leaving behind not even a whisper of what happened, and places so dark, so uncharted, that we've barely begun to scratch the surface of what's down there. These aren't legends, they aren't myths, they're all real, and they're all unsolved, so get comfortable, grab a snack, and join me as we dive into the unknown. The deeper we go, the stranger it gets. Let's begin. Our story today starts in 1986 when a local diver, exploring the coast of Japan, came across something he couldn't explain. Massive stone structures lying silently on the ocean floor. At first, they looked like the ruins of an ancient civilization, but experts couldn't agree. Was this a natural formation shaped by the sea, or evidence of a lost chapter in human history? This is the story of the Yonaguni Monument, one of the most fascinating underwater mysteries ever discovered. The island of Yonaguni lies at the far western edge of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, closer to Taiwan than to Tokyo. It's a rugged, wind-carved place surrounded by turquoise shallows that fall sharply into deep cobalt trenches. Fishermen here have always known the waters are unpredictable, full of sudden currents and hidden drop-offs. But what one diver found below the waves would rewrite how the world saw the ocean itself. His name was Kihachiro Aratake, a local dive instructor who knew the reefs better than anyone. In 1986, while searching for new diving spots near Yonaguni's southern shore, Aratake saw something strange through the shifting blue haze, a series of perfectly straight edges carved into the rock below, stepping down like a giant staircase into the abyss. It didn't look natural, it looked built. When Aratake swam closer, the shape became clearer, a structure rising nearly 25 meters high, with sharp right angles, platforms, terraces, and a long central staircase cut from solid stone. He followed the lines with his hands, edges too clean, corners too perfect. It looked like a temple or a pyramid, or both. Word spread quickly. Soon, scientists, divers, and geologists came from all over Japan and the world to see it. And what they found divided them completely. Some experts, like Professor Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus, became convinced this was no accident of nature. Kimura spent decades studying the monument. He mapped the site, measured the steps, and identified what he believed were clear signs of human construction. Pillars, roads, courtyards, even what looked like a carved face, the head of a giant turtle gazing toward the sea. He argued that the monument was built by an ancient civilization, one that existed long before Japan's recorded history. Perhaps as far back as 10,000 years ago, when lower sea levels would have left the site above water. If he was right, Yonaguni would be older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, a monument to a civilization that vanished before the world even began writing things down. But not everyone agreed. Other scientists, like geologist Robert Schoch, famous for his work on the Great Sphinx of Giza, argued that Yonaguni was a natural formation. He believed the rock had fractured and eroded along natural fault lines over thousands of years, creating what looked like human-made steps and terraces. In his view, the ocean itself was the sculptor, not some forgotten civilization. The precision, he said, was illusion. Our brains simply look for patterns in chaos. And so the debate began, one that's still not settled to this day. Yet, even among skeptics, Yonaguni feels different. Divers describe a sense of awe when they descend into the shadow of its terraces. The light fades, colors dim, and the monument looms out of the blue like something alive. It's not jagged like a reef or random like broken rock. It feels intentional, even if it isn't. The main structure alone is about 150 meters long and 40 meters wide. It has what look like staircases, corridors, and flat platforms. One so large divers call it the stage. And if it truly was built by human hands, the implications are staggering. It would mean there was an organized society capable of large-scale architecture long before we thought humans in the region had such skills. A culture lost to the sea, but there's more. Kimura's team found what appeared to be stone tools nearby, and the remains of walls and roads that seemed to lead away from the main monument, as if part of a larger city now hidden beneath silt. They even claimed to see carvings, lines forming what might be ancient symbols, though erosion has blurred them. Kimura called it Japan's Atlantis. If true, it would suggest that parts of human history, entire civilizations, might be missing, erased not by war or time, but by the sea itself. Most scientists, though, still stand on the side of geology. They point to other places where natural processes create shapes just as startling, like the basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, or the step-like sandstone formations in the American Southwest. The ocean, they argue, can carve just as an artist does. It simply works slower. But even they admit Yonaguni's sharpness, symmetry, and sheer size remain unusual. No one can fully explain how the sea managed to create something that looks so much like a city built for giants. Perhaps that's why Yonaguni endures, not as proof, but as possibility. It sits there, 80 feet below the surface, neither fully understood nor forgotten. Every year divers still descend the cliffs to see it. They drift between walls and steps, tracing the same lines Kihachiro Aratake first saw nearly 40 years ago. Some surface believing it's a miracle of nature, others rise certain they've just visited the ruins of a world long gone. And somewhere in between lies the truth, lost beneath waves, waiting for us to return. But the ocean doesn't give up its secrets easily. Every discovery down here raises another question, another quiet mystery in the dark. And the deeper we go, the more the lines blur, between history and myth, between science and imagination. Because just beyond the coast of Japan, a second mystery drifts in the current, a ship that vanished under perfect skies, found weeks later adrift in silence, her crew gone without a trace. A ghost ship, its cargo untouched, its radio still humming. This is the story of the MV Joyita and the ocean's most haunting disappearance. The sea is full of ghosts, not the kind that walk or whisper, but the kind that drift, ships without crews, vessels found floating in perfect condition, except for one missing piece, everyone who was ever aboard. One of the most haunting of these stories began in 1955, when a small merchant vessel set out across the South Pacific and never came home. Her name was the MV Joyita, and what happened to her still ranks among the strangest disappearances in maritime history. It was October 3rd, 1955, when the Joyita left the port of Apia, Samoa, bound for the Tokelau Islands. The trip should have taken 2 days, a routine supply run, nothing more. On board were 25 people, 16 crew, and 9 passengers, including a government official, a doctor, and a couple of children. They carried medical supplies, food, and fuel. Just another small voyage through the endless blue. The weather was calm, the sea gentle. There was no reason to think anything would go wrong. But in the ocean, calm is never a promise. When the Joyita failed to arrive at her destination after several days, authorities launched a search. For a week, aircraft scanned thousands of square miles of ocean. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no distress calls. It was as if the ship had simply vanished. Then 5 weeks later, a lookout aboard another vessel spotted something drifting halfway between Samoa and Fiji, a pale shape rocking gently in the waves. As they approached, they realized it was a ship, sun-bleached, listing heavily to one side, her name barely visible across the bow, MV Joyita. At first, they thought it was an abandoned wreck, but as they climbed aboard, what they found defied logic. The Joyita was still afloat, though badly damaged. Her port engine was dead, the starboard partially dismantled, and one side of the hull was deeply flooded. Yet she hadn't sunk. Her cargo hold was half full of water, but she remained buoyant, her hull made of cork-lined wood, nearly unsinkable. The 25 passengers and crew were nowhere to be seen, not a body, not a trace. Inside, it looked as if life had simply stopped. The captain's logbook was gone. The navigational equipment had vanished, but food remained on the tables, and personal belongings, shoes, clothing, even luggage, were untouched. The ship's 3 lifeboats were missing. A blood-stained bandage was found near the rail, and every clock aboard had frozen at 10:25. But the most unsettling detail of all was the ship's radio. It had been tuned to the international distress frequency, but its wire was cut. Whoever had been aboard had tried to call for help, and then nothing. The Joyita's hull bore no sign of attack or explosion. No storm had passed through the area. No sign of fire, struggle, or panic. The ship's log, which might have explained everything, was gone. So were the charts. It was as if someone had deliberately removed every clue that could tell the story. Investigators towed the Joyita back to harbour, and theories began almost immediately. One of the first was piracy. The Pacific was no stranger to raiders in the 1950s, small-time thieves who boarded ships for fuel or valuables. Perhaps the Joyita had been attacked, her passengers forced into lifeboats or killed. But there were no bullet holes, no signs of theft. Most of the cargo was still on board, untouched. Another theory suggested engine failure. The starboard engine had been partially disassembled. Maybe a breakdown left them adrift, and as water entered the hull, panic set in. The captain might have ordered everyone into lifeboats, thinking the ship was sinking. But that doesn't make sense either. The Joyita was famously buoyant. She couldn't sink. Even flooded, she would have floated indefinitely. Her captain, Thomas H. Dusty Miller, knew that better than anyone. Miller was an experienced sailor, a former U.S. Navy officer. He had spent years maintaining the Joyita himself. He would have known that abandoning her was the worst possible decision. So why did he and everyone else vanish? One chilling clue lay in the route she'd taken. Her drift path placed her far off course, roughly 600 miles west of where she should have been. That suggests either navigation error or deliberate redirection. And then there's the timing. Every clock stopping at 10:25 could mean the engines failed at that moment, or it could mark something else, an event, a final moment, frozen in time. As news spread, the story took on a life of its own. Some claimed the crew had been taken by Soviet submarines, Cold War espionage in the remote Pacific. Others whispered of insurance fraud or smuggling gone wrong. A few even suggested something stranger, that the Joyita had crossed into the Devil's Sea, the Pacific's counterpart to the Bermuda Triangle, where compasses spin and ships disappear. No theory fit perfectly. Every answer opened new questions. What we do know is that the Joyita had suffered a slow leak from a broken pipe, which had flooded her lower decks. But even then, she wasn't in danger of sinking. The likely scenario is that in the middle of the night, with one engine down and the hull filling with water, the crew panicked. The ship tilted heavily, giving the impression she was about to capsize. In the dark, under pressure, Captain Miller might have ordered everyone into the lifeboats. A fatal decision. Once adrift, with no supplies and no sight of land, they would have been lost to the sea within days. It's the simplest explanation, but it still feels wrong, because sailors know when a ship is dying. They can feel it. They know the difference between danger and deception. And the Joyita had fooled no one before. So if the captain didn't abandon her willingly, what made him leave? In the decades since, the mystery has only deepened. Every new analysis adds detail, but no resolution. The United States Coast Guard, which reviewed the case, called it one of the strangest episodes in Pacific maritime history. Even seasoned sailors can't explain it. The Joyita wasn't destroyed by weather, violence, or nature. She simply let go of her people and drifted on without them. When she was found, she had been afloat for over 600 miles and nearly 5 weeks, carried by currents and wind, her hull cracked, but her will unbroken. A ghost ship, sailing nowhere, waiting for someone to remember her. There's something deeply symbolic about her fate. A vessel built to resist sinking, abandoned in perfect weather, surviving longer than those who fled her. It's a reminder of how easily fear can override reason, even at sea, and how the ocean has its own way of erasing the line between life and legend. The Joyita was repaired, eventually. She sailed again, but she never escaped her reputation. Every new crew felt uneasy. Some said the deck still creaked when no one moved. Others claimed they heard distant footsteps below when the ship was still. A few months later, she was decommissioned for good, left to rot in port, her wooden hull eaten by salt and time. By the 1970s, she was gone completely, broken apart, scattered by storms. Only her story remains. Today, the Joyita is remembered not for tragedy, but for the questions she left behind, a floating riddle that the ocean still refuses to solve. Somewhere out there, 25 names remain unaccounted for, 25 lives swallowed by silence. And though the world has moved on, the current never has. Because the sea doesn't forget, it just waits. And as we drift further into the deep, that silence grows heavier, not emptier, but more aware. It feels like the ocean is watching and waiting for us to find the next secret it buried. Because not far below the Joyita's resting place lies another mystery, one so deep that only a handful of humans have ever seen it. The coldest, darkest point on Earth. A trench that descends farther than Mount Everest rises. At the bottom of that abyss lies something we still don't fully understand. Something we might never reach. This is the story of the Challenger Deep. The ocean has a way of hiding its truth, not in darkness, but in depth, because beyond the reach of light lies a place so vast, so crushingly deep, that it might as well be another world. We call it the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point on Earth. A trench so immense that if you drop Mount Everest into it, the mountain's peak would still be more than a mile underwater. But what makes this place truly mysterious isn't just its depth. It's that we've barely touched it. In over a century of exploration, only a handful of humans have ever been there. And even they came back with more questions than answers. The Challenger deep lies in the Mariana Trench, about 200 miles southwest of Guam. It's part of a vast underwater scar, a 1,500-mile-long crescent where two massive tectonic plates meet, one sliding beneath the other. That collision carved a wound into the Earth's crust, a chasm nearly 7 miles deep, filled with cold, black water under pressure 1,000 times greater than at the surface. It is a place where sunlight never reaches, where the temperature hovers just above freezing, where even sound moves differently. heavier, slower, muted by the weight of the world above. Down there, time feels irrelevant. Even the ocean's heartbeat seems to stop. The trench was first discovered in 1875 by a British expedition aboard the HMS Challenger, the ship that gave the deep its name. Using a simple weighted rope, they measured a depth of over 8,000 meters. It was a rough estimate, but enough to reveal that something unimaginably vast lurked beneath the waves. At the time, it was just a number, a curiosity scribbled in a logbook. No one could truly imagine what that kind of depth meant. It was simply too far beyond human reach. But as technology evolved, so did our curiosity. And in 1960, two men decided to go down and see for themselves. Their names were Jacques Picard and Don Walsh. They boarded a small submersible called the Trieste, a steel sphere barely big enough for two men to sit shoulder to shoulder. The walls were nearly 5 inches thick, the only thing standing between them and instant death. On January 23, 1960, the Trieste began its descent into the unknown. It took nearly 5 hours to reach the bottom. As they sank, daylight faded, the water darkened, and the pressure outside rose to more than 16,000 pounds per square inch. Then, somewhere around 30,000 feet, they heard a sharp crack. The small window had fractured, not broken, but enough to remind them how fragile their tiny capsule was in the weight of the abyss. Still they continued. At 10,011 meters they touched down, the first humans to ever see the floor of the deepest part of the sea. What they saw surprised them. Not the smooth, barren wasteland they expected, but something alive. They reported seeing fish-like creatures, pale and slow-moving, gliding just above the seafloor. That shouldn't have been possible. Scientists believed life couldn't exist under such crushing pressure. And yet, there they were, moving, thriving, surviving. Picard wrote in his log, "We saw a flatfish-like creature and shrimp. Life exists even at the greatest depth." It was a revelation and a contradiction, because when samples later returned to the surface, none showed complex life. Was it an illusion? Or had they seen something that couldn't survive the journey back to light? The ocean, as always, stayed silent. For over 50 years, no one returned. The trench remained undisturbed, a black cathedral sealed beneath miles of water. It wasn't until 2012 that another human made the descent. Filmmaker James Cameron, aboard his submersible, the Deep Sea Challenger. Cameron spent nearly 3 hours on the seafloor, alone, collecting samples and filming the alien landscape. He described it as a completely desolate, lunar place. And no fish this time, only strange, translucent creatures that moved like drifting ghosts. In some recordings there were faint sounds, clicks, groans, rhythmic pulses, deep sea noises no one could identify. Some were natural, the groaning of the earth itself, the distant crack of tectonic plates. But others? No one knows. Even modern instruments can't fully explain all the sounds that echo through the trench. Some are too regular, too patterned, almost biological. Scientists call them biophonic anomalies. Others simply call them the deep's whispers. Every few years, unmanned probes return with new images and new mysteries. They find organisms that defy classification, creatures with translucent skin, pulsing lights, and bodies built to survive the impossible, microbes that live on methane and sulfur, thriving where there is no sunlight, no warmth, no comfort. They find strange tracks in the silt, as if something large has crawled or slithered along the seafloor, far deeper than any known creature could go. And once, in 2015, a robotic probe recorded something even stranger, a large, moving shadow, slow, deliberate, crossing the camera's field before disappearing into the dark. The video remains inconclusive. Some call it a trick of light, others aren't so sure. Because the truth is, we've explored less than 5% of the world's oceans, and less than 0.05% of the deep sea. Everything we think we know about the ocean might just be the surface of something much larger, much older, and far beyond human understanding. There's also the mystery of the sounds. For decades, underwater microphones have recorded noises coming from the trench that science can't identify. The most famous of these is known simply as the bloop. Captured in 1997 by the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the bloop was the loudest underwater sound ever recorded, so loud it was picked up by sensors 3,000 miles apart. At first, scientists thought it might be the call of an enormous animal, something larger than any whale ever known. Later, they suggested it was the sound of ice breaking from glaciers, but even now, no one can say for sure. The frequency, the rhythm, the scale, it all still feels alive. And it's not the only one. There's the upsweep, the train, and the whistle, deep, repeating sounds with no clear origin, echoing from the bottom of the Earth's oceans. Each one more haunting than the last. Some oceanographers have a theory, not about monsters, but about memory. They say the ocean records what happens to it, that every sound, every quake, every fall of stone echoes somewhere in the deep, that the bloop, the upsweep, and all the rest may not be animals, but ancient events still resonating through the water, the planet's own heartbeat reverberating from the abyss. It's a beautiful thought that the sea remembers, but others think the sounds are something new. Signals from creatures we haven't yet found, or can't yet understand. If there's one truth we've learned about the ocean, it's that it keeps its secrets well. We send machines down with lights and cameras, and they come back blind and broken. We send microphones, and they return with songs no one can explain. And every time we think we've reached the bottom, the ocean reminds us there is no bottom. There are layers upon layers, each darker, stranger, more alien than the one before. The Challenger. Deep isn't just a place. It's a reminder of scale, of how small we are, and how vast everything else might be. At that depth, light has no meaning. Color disappears. Even time seems to slow. It's a world where gravity feels sideways and silence hums like static. A place that seems less like part of our planet and more like something from another one. And perhaps that's why we keep going back. Because somewhere inside us, we're drawn to the edge of what we can understand. To stand, or in this case, float, at the border between the known and the unknowable. Today, unmanned submersibles still explore the trench, sending back high-definition footage of creatures that look like living threads of glass or floating ribbons of light. Some are so fragile they dissolve when brought to the surface. Others seem to survive pressures that should crush solid steel. Life down there doesn't just adapt, it thrives. And in its silent movements, it reminds us that nature has no boundaries. That mystery isn't something to solve, it's something to listen to, the Challenger. Deep remains the most unexplored frontier on Earth. Every descent into its blackness is a conversation with something ancient, something that's been watching since before we had words for fear or wonder. And as our machines rise back toward light, you can't help but imagine what stays below, what waits in that perfect stillness, 7 miles under the world. Because even after all our maps and measurements, the ocean's greatest secret may not be its creatures or its depth, but the simple, humbling truth that we have never truly seen the earth we live on. And so, as we leave the silent abyss behind, our journey drifts towards something once lost, a forgotten world beneath the waves, buried for centuries, rediscovered only by accident. A city swallowed by the sea, preserved like a dream made of stone and coral. This is the story of Heraklion, Egypt's sunken city. The ocean does not forget. It hides, it erases, but it never truly forgets. Sometimes, when the currents shift and the sand drifts away, it gives us a glimpse of what it's kept, a memory of a world that used to be. For centuries, sailors and scholars spoke of an ancient city lost beneath the sea, a city of wealth and worship where pharaohs and gods once walked side by side. A place called Heraklion. For almost 2,000 years, people believed it was only a myth, a story told in old Greek texts, a name half swallowed by time. And then, one day, the sea gave it back. The rediscovery began quietly off the northern coast of Egypt, near the mouth of the Nile. In the late 1990s, a French archaeologist named Franck Goddio was searching for the remains of Alexandria's ancient harbour, a project already ambitious enough. But what he found instead would become one of the most extraordinary underwater discoveries in history. Beneath layers of silt and sand, 10 kilometers off the coast, his team detected strange shapes, stone walls, columns, and something massive buried below. As divers descended, their flashlights caught the glint of carved granite. What they brushed away wasn't rock. It was a statue's face, smooth, symmetrical, unmistakably human. And then more faces followed, dozens of them, all lying flat on the ocean floor, staring upward through the drifting light. They had found Heraklion. The name comes from Heracles, the Greek hero we know as Hercules, though the city's original Egyptian name was Thonis. It was once a thriving port, standing at the edge of the Nile Delta, controlling trade between Egypt, Greece, and the rest of the ancient Mediterranean. Here, ships brought gold, wine, grain, and ivory from every direction. But Heraklion was more than a harbour. It was sacred ground. This was the city where the great temple of Amun stood, where pharaohs came to be blessed before ascending to the throne, and where priests carried statues of gods through streets lined with torches and song. A city built to impress both mortals and the divine. And then it vanished. Historians had long puzzled over what happened. Records mention the city as late as the 2nd century BC, and then nothing, gone, swallowed by the sea. Some blamed earthquakes, others believed floods or the slow shifting of the Nile's branches, but no one knew for sure. And then, 2,000 years later, divers finally saw the truth for themselves. What Goddio's team uncovered was astonishing. Under just a few meters of water lay an entire city. Statues, temples, inscriptions, coins, jewelry, and colossal stone structures weighing up to 50 tons. There were columns as tall as buildings, fragments of ships still buried in the mud, and intricate hieroglyphs carved so finely they still caught the light after 2 millennia underwater. In one area, they found a massive red granite statue of Hapi, the god of the Nile's floods, a figure rarely depicted in such scale. Nearby stood another, a queen, arms outstretched, her face still serene. Both had toppled gently as the city sank, preserved in their fall. It was as if the sea had been careful with its secret. The artifacts told a story, one of life, wealth, and sudden loss. Gold coins from Greece, stone weights stamped with Egyptian hieroglyphs, fragments of pottery from every corner of the ancient world. It proved what historians had only guessed, that Heraklion had once been Egypt's gateway to the Mediterranean. Before Alexandria rose to power, this was where the world entered Egypt, and where Egypt entered legend. But the question remained, how did it end up underwater? The answer, it turns out, may lie beneath the very ground it was built on. Heracleion stood on soft clay and sand, part of a fragile delta, constantly shifting under the weight of the Nile's floods. Over centuries, as the land became saturated, the soil weakened. A single earthquake or tidal surge could have been enough to make the earth collapse, pulling temples, homes, and people down in a single, terrible moment. In geological terms, it's called liquefaction, when solid ground suddenly turns to liquid. In human terms, it must have felt like the end of the world, an entire city sinking into darkness, swallowed whole, leaving only ripples and silence behind. For over 1,000 years the world forgot it, but the ocean did not. It kept Heracleion perfectly sealed beneath its shifting sands, the statues resting like sleepers, the temples still standing, waiting. When divers entered the city, they found roads and canals still traceable. The layout was remarkably intact, a grid of streets, docks and plazas where life once moved at the edge of the Nile's mouth. There were anchors still attached to invisible ships, altars still bearing the carvings of forgotten gods, and among them stone steles, official inscriptions written in both Greek and Egyptian describing tax laws, trade agreements, and dedications to Amun. One of them, perfectly preserved, finally confirmed what scholars had debated for centuries. Thonis and Heracleion were the same city. Two names for one place, a bridge between worlds. Even now, the site is a living museum, but not one anyone can simply walk through. It's a labyrinth of ruins that must be explored slowly, gently, and in silence. Every movement stirs up clouds of silt that erase visibility in seconds. Divers describe it as like exploring through fog, reaching out with gloved hands and feeling history in the dark. Each object recovered is cleaned, documented, and then returned to the water, preserved in the environment that has kept it safe for 2,000 years. It's a strange kind of archaeology, one where you don't so much uncover the past as swim through it. What's most haunting about Heracleion isn't just its scale or mystery, it's the stillness. Cities on land decay, crumble and collapse, but underwater, Heracleion simply sleeps. Every statue, every wall, every symbol looks as if it's waiting for the people to return. Divers often describe a feeling of being watched down there, not by ghosts, but by the weight of time itself, the gaze of history, patient and unbothered. You drift past the faces of gods, past the stones carved by hands long gone, and realize they are still here. We are the ones who vanished, and yet there's a quiet beauty to it. Because the ocean didn't destroy Heracleion, it preserved it. Salt water became its guardian. Silt became its shroud. What was once lost to time is now timeless. In that sense, Heracleion is less a tragedy and more a reminder that everything we build eventually returns to nature, not as punishment but as continuation. Some archaeologists call it Egypt's Atlantis, though the comparison doesn't quite fit. Atlantis is a myth, a story about arrogance and downfall. Heracleion was real, a living city of faith and trade, caught between river and sea, undone not by pride, but by chance. And perhaps that's what makes it more haunting, because it wasn't destroyed by gods or wars, it simply sank. One day, people walked its streets. The next, the streets were gone. No warning, no witness, just silence and water. Today, as the divers surface from Heracleion's ruins, they rise through shimmering layers of blue, leaving behind columns and statues that remain undisturbed. The light fades back to gold. The waves above look ordinary again, and no one on the surface would ever guess that a city sleeps just beneath them, a city that once worshipped the sun, now worshipped by the sea. And as we move on from Egypt's lost world, the ocean carries us forward, deeper, quieter, because not all vanishings belong to the ancient past. Some are modern, some still ache in the memory of those who wait. Our next story begins in 2017 off the coast of South America, where a modern submarine vanished without a trace. A crew of 44 men gone in an instant, leaving behind one of the most heartbreaking mysteries in recent maritime history. This is the story of the San Juan. The ocean never changes its voice. Whether whispering over ancient ruins or roaring over new ships, it speaks the same language, quiet, cold, and patient. It listens, it takes, and sometimes it doesn't give back. In November 2017, that voice fell silent over the South Atlantic. A modern submarine, built for defense and discovery, went missing off the coast of Argentina. Its name was the ARA San Juan. And what happened to it is one of the ocean's most recent, most chilling mysteries. The San Juan was a diesel-electric submarine, sleek and sturdy, 66 meters long, with a crew of 44 sailors. She had been refitted only a few years earlier, inspected, modernized, ready for duty. On November 15, 2017, she was returning home from a mission near the southern tip of South America, near the cold, rolling waters between Argentina and the Falkland Islands. Her last radio message came just before dawn. It was brief, routine, and calm. The captain reported a small electrical malfunction. Seawater had entered the snorkel system, causing a short circuit in one of the batteries. He assured command that it had been contained. Nothing unusual. The San Juan would continue on course. Then, nothing. No further transmissions, no distress call, no trace. At first, it seemed like a technical issue. Maybe a communications failure or a diversion for repairs. But hours turned into days, and the silence deepened. Argentina's Navy launched a full search operation, joined by ships and aircraft from over a dozen nations. For days, they scanned the cold expanse of the South Atlantic. The weather worsened, high waves, fierce winds, freezing spray. Still, they searched. And then a sound was detected. Hydrophones, underwater listening stations scattered across the world's oceans, picked up something strange. A short, sharp acoustic anomaly recorded on the very morning the San Juan disappeared. It came from roughly 400 kilometers off the Argentine coast, near where the submarine's last message had originated. The sound lasted less than a second. It was low, powerful, and final. Experts called it an impulsive event, the signature of a sudden, catastrophic explosion deep underwater. But what caused it? And why? The investigation began immediately, but the ocean offered no clues. For an entire year, nothing was found. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no signals. Families of the crew held vigils along the coastline, waiting for news that never came. The sea remained calm and empty, as if nothing had ever happened. Then, 12 months later, a private ocean survey company called Ocean Infinity was contracted to continue the search. Their robotic submersibles combed the seabed for weeks, scanning the darkness with sonar. And on November 17, 2018, exactly 1 year and 2 days after the San Juan's disappearance, they found it. The wreck lay 907 meters below the surface, nearly 3 kilometers off course, in a trench of soft sediment. The sonar image showed a shape once sleek and whole, now broken into 3 large sections, crushed inward, scattered along the seabed. When the remote cameras descended, the truth became clear. The San Juan had imploded. At that depth, the water pressure is over 1,300 pounds per square inch, enough to crush steel like paper. The submarine's hull had given way almost instantly, collapsing inward at nearly the speed of sound. Every life aboard was lost in less than a second, before any of them could even feel fear. It was fast, silent, and absolute. What caused it, though, remains uncertain. The investigation concluded that the initial problem, seawater entering the battery compartment, might have led to a short circuit and fire. That fire could have produced toxic gases, forcing the crew to shut down systems. In that condition, the submarine may have descended too far, too fast, until pressure took over. But there are still details that don't quite fit. The captain's final message described the issue as controlled. He reported no danger. He was calm, composed, confident. Whatever happened afterward must have been sudden, a chain of failure so fast that no alarm, no message, no final call could escape. Some specialists think the fire reignited after the report, overwhelming the systems. Others suggest the hull may have been weakened by stress, leading to a spontaneous collapse. But no theory fully explains why the San Juan, experienced, well-maintained, crewed by professionals, went from operational to obliterated in moments. When images of the wreck were released to the families, they showed twisted steel, torn cables, and the ghostly outline of a submarine resting in stillness. It was not an open grave. It was a sealed one. The remains were never recovered. Argentina declared 3 days of mourning. In ports across the country, sirens wailed, ships flew black ribbons, and the names of the 44 were read aloud, one by one, against the wind. It was the largest naval tragedy in modern Argentine history, and one that left the world quietly shaken, because the ocean, in its vast indifference, had taken something new, not a relic of the past, but a piece of the present, a reminder that no amount of technology, no degree of mastery, can make us immune to the deep. But there was another layer to the story, one that only deepened the mystery. In the months before its disappearance, the San Juan had reported unusual tracking, being followed by unidentified vessels off the Patagonian coast. It was a region long known for illegal fishing and international patrols. Some speculated that the submarine had encountered something, or someone, it wasn't supposed to. Others dismissed it as coincidence, just the sea doing what it always does, confusing, misleading, consuming. But in Argentina, where the story still feels raw, the truth feels less certain. For many, the San Juan is not just a tragedy, it's a symbol of how, even in the age of satellites and sonar, the ocean can still make things disappear. Every wreck tells a story, but the ocean tells it slowly. Waves soften the metal, coral claims the surfaces, fish drift through the remains like quiet caretakers. Eventually, what was once a machine of war becomes a reef, a shelter, a home. Even loss in time turns to life again. Today, the San Juan rests on the seabed as a monument to human bravery and fragility, proof that we still dare to enter the unknown, even knowing how unforgiving it can be. There are plans to make the site a protected memorial, a place of silence and respect. No divers, no disturbance, no recovery. Just the ocean, keeping its watch. The most haunting thing about the San Juan isn't what we know, but what we don't. 44 sailors trained, alert, prepared, gone between one heartbeat and the next. A message sent, an assurance given, a breath taken. And then nothing. It's the same pattern that's echoed through the centuries. Ships that vanish, crews that never return, and questions that stay unanswered long after the last ripple fades. Maybe that's the ocean's truest mystery. Not monsters, not legends, not even depth, but disappearance itself. How something so big, so bright, can vanish so completely. When the ocean is calm, it looks empty, but that stillness is deceiving. Beneath the surface lies everything we've lost, from the earliest temples to the newest ships, each story layered upon the last, resting in cold blue silence. If you listen long enough, You can almost hear them. The hum of old engines, the echo of ancient prayers, the soft murmur of names carried by current. The sea doesn't destroy. It remembers. And as we drift away from the San Juan, our journey carries us towards something stranger. Not a ship, but a place. A blue void deeper than any diver has ever reached. A vertical abyss said to pull light and sound into itself. A place where legend says the water has no bottom. Where science meets myth. This is the story of the Dragon Hole, the world's deepest blue hole. There are places in the ocean that seem alive, not with movement, but with presence. Places that feel as though the water itself is watching. The kind of places sailors use to mark on maps with symbols instead of names. One of those places lies in the South China Sea. Locals call it the Dragon Hole, a deep, vertical shaft in the middle of a coral reef. It plunges straight down into blackness, so deep that sunlight fades before it reaches the halfway point. Scientists say it's the deepest blue hole on Earth, but the people who live nearby tell a different story. They say it's bottomless, that it's the eye of a sleeping dragon, and that sometimes the sea around it moves even when the wind does not. For centuries, fishermen near the Paracel Islands avoided the area. They said their nets vanished there. Boats passing too close would lose their bearings, as if pulled slightly off course. Some claimed that lights were seen flickering beneath the water on moonless nights. Others said they heard sounds, low, rhythmic pulses that rose from the deep and faded again, like slow breathing. To outsiders, these were just stories. But in 2016, a team of marine scientists decided to find out for themselves. They arrived with drones, sensors, and remotely operated submarines. Their goal was simple: to measure the Dragon Hole, to learn what was inside. What they found would surprise even them. Blue holes are rare. Natural sinkholes formed when limestone caves collapse and flood. They're found in places like the Bahamas, Belize, and the South Pacific. Each one is a vertical tunnel through time, a layer cake of Earth's history, preserved in water. But the Dragon Hole, also known as Yonaguni Blue Hole, is in a league of its own. It measures over 300 meters deep, deeper than any other known blue hole on the planet. That's nearly the height of the Eiffel Tower swallowed by sea. At its surface, it looks peaceful, a perfect circle of deep cobalt ringed by bright turquoise shallows. But as you descend, the world changes, color drains away, sound becomes thick, pressure builds. By 100 meters, the water is already black. By 200, the temperature drops sharply. And at the bottom, or if there even is one, the sensors begin to fail. The first expedition sent robotic probes down into the shaft, trailing cables and lights. At around 300 meters, the signal cut out. No one could tell if the drone had reached the floor or simply drifted into an unmapped tunnel. Subsequent dives went deeper, mapping the hole's contours. They found it was not just a straight drop, but a twisting spiral, almost organic in shape, like a massive corkscrew carved into the limestone. Some parts narrowed abruptly, others widened into hidden chambers. The deeper the robots went, the less stable their instruments became. Pressure disrupted the cameras, compasses spun, the ocean seemed to erase direction itself. One researcher described it like this: "It's not just deep, it's deceptive. You feel as though you're being pulled inward, not downward." Scientists were able to collect water samples at various depths, and what they discovered was even stranger. Most blue holes, while mysterious, are connected to the open sea. Tides move in and out, bringing oxygen and life. But the Dragon Hole is different. Below about 100 meters, the water becomes completely anoxic. No oxygen at all. That means nothing can live there. No fish. No coral. No bacteria even. It's a void, perfectly still, chemically isolated from the rest of the ocean. Whatever falls into it stays there, preserved in silence. And yet within that silence the sensors recorded something unexpected: movement. At depths beyond where life should exist, small fluctuations in temperature and density were detected. Tiny waves of change, rising and falling as though stirred by something unseen. They tried again, sending multiple instruments down at once. Each time, the readings were slightly different, never identical, never random. Patterns emerged, like a heartbeat too slow for human rhythm. Some speculated it was trapped gas or shifting currents. Others weren't so sure. Because no other blue hole behaves quite like this. It's as if the water inside the dragon hole isn't part of the ocean at all, but something older, sealed off for millennia. Local legends have their own explanations. They say the dragon hole is the doorway to the undersea world of spirits, the realm where souls lost at sea drift forever. That's why compasses fail there, why instruments flicker, why even sound changes. Fishermen still refuse to anchor too close. When they pass by, they drop offerings: a coin, a ribbon, a whispered prayer, just in case the dragon below is listening. And sometimes, when the light is right, they say the hole glows, not from sunlight, but from within. A pale, bluish shimmer that ripples outward like breath. No one's ever been able to capture it on camera, but everyone who's seen it swears it's real. Even among scientists, the dragon hole remains a puzzle. No one knows how deep it truly goes. The last reliable measurement placed the bottom at around 301 meters, but sonar signals have been inconsistent. Some instruments suggest deeper voids, narrow side passages that descend beyond the reach of light or pressure sensors. It's possible, they say, that the dragon hole connects to a subterranean cave system running beneath the seafloor itself, a hidden network that could stretch for miles, untouched since before humans ever mapped the ocean. If that's true, then there are places within it that have never been reached by air, sound, or life. Silent worlds beneath our world. Every few years, new expeditions attempt to map it again. Each one returns with more data and more uncertainty. It seems the deeper they go, the less they understand, as if the whole refuses to be known. Even the way sound behaves there is strange. Acoustic sensors record echoes that don't match their source. When divers send down pings to measure distance, the reflections come back distorted, delayed, as if bouncing off something that isn't rock or water, something that moves. Of course, science remains cautious. Every anomaly has a potential explanation: pressure waves, instrument error, complex geometry. But for those who've seen it in person, there's something about the dragon hole that logic doesn't quite contain. The way the water feels heavier there, the way time seems slower, the way light bends differently around the rim, like looking down into another dimension. One diver described it best: it's like staring into an eye, calm, endless, and impossibly old. What makes the dragon hole truly fascinating isn't just its depth or even its mystery, it's what it represents. The limits of our reach, our belief that we understand this planet when really we've only explored its skin. We've mapped Mars more completely than our own ocean floor. And beneath those waves, there may be worlds as strange as any we can imagine. Hidden ecosystems, ancient formations, even unknown forms of life that thrive where we cannot. Places like the dragon hole remind us that the Earth is still wild, still unknowable, still capable of awe. Perhaps that's why we're drawn to these voids. Not just to measure them, but to feel them. To stand at the edge of the known world and listen for something that answers back. Because when you look into the deep long enough, you begin to understand it's not the ocean that's mysterious, it's us. our need to explain what cannot be explained, our fear of silence, our hunger for meaning in the dark. The dragon hole remains unmoved, a vertical wound in the ocean, a reminder that even in a world mapped by satellites and sonar, there are still places untouched by understanding, a place that swallows light and returns stillness. A doorway, perhaps, not to another world, but to the part of this one we've yet to know. And as we rise from its blue depths, we drift once again into history, from the unexplained to the extraordinary. Because not all mysteries lie in nature. Some were built by human hands, discovered centuries later, still defying explanation. Our next story begins off the coast of Greece, where divers searching for ancient treasure found something far stranger. A device so advanced it shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years. This is the story of the Antikythera treasure and the world's first machine. The sea gives and the sea keeps. Every discovery it allows feels like a small act of mercy, as if it's letting us see what it buried just for a moment before the currents close again. And sometimes what it gives back doesn't belong to its time at all. Off the coast of Greece, a group of sponge divers once stumbled upon such a gift, a secret so strange that even now, more than a century later, scientists still struggle to understand it. This is the story of the Antikythera treasure and the mysterious bronze device hidden among it, now called the world's first computer. It began in 1900 near the small island of Antikythera, between Crete and the Greek mainland. A storm had driven a group of sponge divers to take shelter there. When the weather cleared, they decided to explore the seabed, hoping to collect sponges before heading home. One of the divers, Elias Stadiatis, descended first. What he found was no coral reef or patch of seagrass. When he resurfaced, his face was pale, his eyes wide. He told his captain he had seen bodies. Statues, he thought, scattered across the ocean floor. At first, no one believed him, but when the others dove down, they saw it too. Lying in the sand 30 meters below was a vast wreck. An ancient ship, its timbers rotted away, its cargo of marble and bronze glimmering faintly in the dim light. The divers had found an ancient Greek trading vessel over 2,000 years old, wrecked sometime around 70 BCE. Inside it was a treasure unlike anything ever seen. Statues of philosophers, warriors, horses, even fragments of jewelry and amphorae filled with the ghost of wine. It would become known as the Antikythera shipwreck, one of the most important underwater archaeological finds in history. For months, divers hauled the artifacts to the surface. It was grueling work, the depths dangerous, their suits heavy, their air supply limited. One diver even died from decompression sickness, but the discoveries were worth it. Dozens of near-perfect bronze statues, coins, ceramics, and ornaments that had lain untouched since the time of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Then among the fragments of corroded metal, someone found something that didn't look like art or treasure. It was a small lump of bronze and wood, no larger than a shoebox, covered in gears. At first, no one paid much attention. It looked like a piece of machinery, and that made no sense at all. There were no machines in ancient Greece, or so they thought. The artifact was sent to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where it sat quietly for decades. Then in the 1950s, a British historian named Derek de Solla Price took interest. He studied X-rays of the corroded mass and realized that beneath the crust of bronze were interlocking gears, perfectly cut, arranged in a system of astonishing precision. It wasn't just one or two wheels, it was a network of them, more than 30 in total, connected by a series of shafts and dials. Each gear had teeth so fine they could have been made by a modern watchmaker. Price called it an ancient Greek computer, a device capable of calculating the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, centuries before the first mechanical clocks were ever invented. The discovery sent shockwaves through archaeology. It changed everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. Because this wasn't a simple calendar or sundial, it was a complex astronomical instrument able to predict eclipses, track the phases of the moon, and even chart the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. Each dial represented a celestial cycle, each gear turned in harmony with the heavens. It was, in essence, a miniature model of the cosmos, built by human hands, centuries before the birth of modern science. The Greeks had words for such devices, mechanismos, or techni. But no one imagined they could have built something this sophisticated. The Antikythera mechanism was over 1,000 years ahead of its time. Who built it? No one knows for sure. Some scholars believe it may have been designed by followers of Archimedes, the great mathematician from Syracuse. Others link it to Hipparchus, the father of trigonometry. Whoever made it understood not just astronomy, but engineering, mathematics, and craftsmanship far beyond what we associate with the ancient world. The gears were hand-cut from bronze, with teeth so evenly spaced they'd require tools of incredible precision. It wasn't a one-of-a-kind experiment either. It had markings and instructions suggesting it was meant to be used, not simply admired. This was not art. This was function, and that made it even more mysterious. Over the years, scientists have reconstructed the mechanism digitally, using 3D scans and high-resolution X-rays to see inside without disturbing the fragile metal. Piece by piece, they've revealed its secrets. The largest dial displayed the zodiac, the constellations through which the sun and moon appear to move. Another tracked the metonic cycle, a 19-year rhythm aligning lunar months with solar years. Smaller dials predicted eclipses, adjusting for the moon's elliptical orbit. And on the back, almost hidden, was a spiral calendar marking the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It wasn't just a clock, it was a universe made of bronze. But even now, one question remains unanswered. How did it end up at the bottom of the sea? The ship that carried it likely set sail from Rhodes, an island famous for its scholars and engineers. It was probably bound for Rome, a gift or tribute for a powerful patron. But somewhere along the Aegean, a storm rose, and the ship went down. The mechanism sank with it, preserved by salt and sand for over 2,000 years, waiting for a diver's flashlight to find it again. It's haunting to think that had the storm not struck, this device might have changed history. Imagine if the Roman Empire had inherited not just Greek philosophy, but Greek engineering. The world might have entered its mechanical age 1,000 years early, but the sea has always had other plans. There's something poetic about it, really. A machine built to predict the heavens, drowned by the very world it sought to measure. A device that calculated time, lost to time itself. When you see the Antikythera mechanism today, displayed in a quiet glass case in Athens, it doesn't look like much, just a corroded hunk of bronze, green and brittle. But if you look closer, you can still see the teeth of its gears, locked forever in silence, still turning, in imagination if not in motion. It reminds us that brilliance isn't bound by chronology, that sometimes the future happens early and is lost before it can begin. And yet, the mystery isn't just mechanical, it's philosophical. How much do we really know about our ancestors? About what was built, written, or dreamed, and then swallowed by war, decay, or water? For every artifact we recover, how many are still resting beneath the waves, their secrets intact? The Antikythera mechanism is both a relic and a question, proof that human genius has always reached for the stars, even when surrounded by sea. But the ocean isn't done yet, because just as it hid one treasure for 2,000 years, it has hidden others, cities, ships, and stories that wait in the quiet dark. Some we find, most we don't. And somewhere out there, in the same sea that took the mechanism, lie other wrecks, some legendary, some forgotten, all holding their own riddles in silence. Our next story drifts toward one of them. A ship found adrift with no crew, no logbook, and no answers. A vessel so famous that its name has become a metaphor for mystery itself. This is the story of the ghost ship Mary Celeste. The sea remembers everything. It remembers the weight of ships that crossed it, the laughter of their crews, the sound of sails in the wind, and sometimes it remembers the moment when all of that disappears. There's a certain kind of silence at sea, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like a question left hanging in the air, a silence that waits for an answer that will never come. In the winter of 1872, that silence surrounded a small brigantine drifting through the Atlantic. Its sails were torn, its deck empty, its wheel unmanned. There were no bodies, no struggle, no sign of life at all. Only a name painted across the bow, half faded by salt and sun, Mary Celeste. The story begins on November 7, 1872, when the Mary Celeste left the port of New York, bound for Genoa, Italy. On board were the captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 men. They carried a cargo of industrial alcohol and 700 barrels of it, tightly sealed in the hold. The weather was fair, the sea calm. The ship was strong, recently refitted and well provisioned for the crossing. By all accounts, it was a routine voyage. And then, nothing. For almost a month, the Mary Celeste vanished into the Atlantic's endless horizon. Then, on December 5, 1872, another ship appeared. The Dei Gratia, a British brigantine sailing the same route from New York to Gibraltar. At around noon, the Dei Gratia's first mate, Oliver Devoe, spotted a vessel drifting aimlessly in the distance. Her sails were partly set but flapping loose, her motion erratic, not the steady course of a ship under command. When they drew closer, something felt wrong. No signal flags, no crew on deck, no response to hails. Captain David Morehouse ordered a boarding party. As Devoe and 2 men rowed across the quiet water, they could hear the eerie creak of the drifting ship. Wood bending in rhythm with the waves, rigging tapping against the mast. No human sound at all. They climbed aboard and found a ghost. The ship was in near-perfect condition. The cargo hold was intact. The food stores were untouched. There was no sign of struggle or fire, but the lifeboat was missing. So was the captain's logbook. The last entry was dated November 25th, 10 days before the ship was found, and made no mention of any trouble. Clothes hung neatly in closets. Pipes, toys, and tools lay in place. The captain's sword sat under his bunk, rusted but clean of blood. The only clues were small, almost meaningless. A pump disassembled, a few inches of water in the bilge, a broken rail where the lifeboat had been lowered. Everything else was exactly as it should have been, except for the people. All 10 souls gone. The boarding party steered the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, where a formal investigation began. What they found only deepened the mystery. The ship was seaworthy, her cargo barely disturbed. There was no evidence of piracy, mutiny, or foul play. The barrels of alcohol were still sealed, though 9 were found leaking. The captain's papers were gone, but navigation charts remained. The investigators could find only one conclusion: the crew had abandoned ship for reasons unknown. But why would an experienced captain, with his wife and child aboard, leave a perfectly safe vessel in the middle of a calm sea? The theories came quickly. Some believed the leaking alcohol had caused fumes below deck, leading Briggs to fear an explosion. He might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat temporarily, only for a sudden gust of wind or misjudged rope to separate them from the drifting ship. By the time they realized, it was too late. The Mary Celeste sailed on without them. Others suspected mutiny. Perhaps the crew killed Briggs, stole the lifeboat, and perished themselves. But there were no signs of violence. No blood, no broken furniture, nothing missing. Some suggested piracy, but pirates didn't leave behind cargo, food, or valuables. And so the explanations grew stranger. There were whispers of sea quakes, rare underwater tremors that could jolt a ship violently enough to cause panic, of rogue waves, sudden and massive walls of water that appear without warning, of mirages and optical illusions that might have made the crew believe land was nearby. And then came the supernatural. Whispers of sea monsters, curses, ghosts, even alien abductions. A century before such words existed, the story of the Mary Celeste spread through newspapers like wildfire, each retelling wilder than the last. Soon she was no longer just a ship, she was an omen. What's certain is this: the Mary Celeste continued to drift for over a week before she was found. During that time, she crossed hundreds of miles of ocean without a single hand to guide her. Her sails trimmed themselves with the wind, her rudder locked loosely in place. A perfect ghost. Even her name feels poetic now. Celeste, meaning heavenly. A ship that sailed into legend, too far for truth to follow. In the years that followed, the Mary Celeste was refitted and sent back to sea, but her luck never returned. Every captain who commanded her met misfortune. By the 1880s, her reputation was so cursed that no sailor wanted to crew her. Eventually, she was deliberately wrecked near Haiti, run aground in a failed insurance scam. The ship that had survived everything else ended not by mystery, but by greed. The ocean perhaps took it personally. For centuries now, it has never returned her bones. No wreck, no fragment, no trace of her remains has ever been confirmed. It's as if the Mary Celeste slipped fully into myth. Not sunk, not lost, just gone. The mystery endures not because it's unsolved, but because it feels unfinished. Like a story cut off mid-sentence. A ship without a crew, a lifeboat without a course, a question without an answer. And maybe that's why it lingers, because we're drawn to stories that end too soon, to mysteries that resist conclusion. The Mary Celeste reminds us that the sea doesn't always close its chapters neatly. Sometimes it just lets them drift. Today, historians lean toward the most human explanation, that Captain Briggs, fearing fumes or flooding, made a split-second decision that went fatally wrong, that the crew abandoned ship expecting to return, but never could. A simple, tragic mistake, amplified by distance and silence. But there's another kind of truth in the legend, a quieter one, that in every empty ship, every unanswered signal, there's something of us reflected back. Our curiosity, our fear of vanishing, our awe of the unknown. The Mary Celeste didn't just disappear into the sea, she disappeared into our imagination. And there she sails still. And as her phantom drifts out of sight, the waves carry us once more toward another secret, one buried not just in myth, but in sand and stone, a city older than memory, perfectly preserved beneath calm water, a place that may rewrite what we think we know about the dawn of civilization. This is the story of Pavlopetri, the world's oldest underwater city. The sea has two kinds of silence. There's the silence of the surface, calm, blue, alive with light. And then there's the silence below, heavy, patient, eternal. That's where time stops moving forward. That's where the past still breathes. Just off the coast of southern Greece, in a shallow bay near the village of Pavlopetri, lies one of the oldest cities ever found. Not in ruins upon a hillside, not beneath desert sand, but completely underwater. A city that slipped beneath the waves thousands of years ago, and somehow never left. This is Pavlopetri, the world's oldest known underwater city. And even after decades of study, it still keeps its secrets close. The story begins in 1904 when a British geologist named Phocion Negris was surveying the coastline of Laconia, near the small island of Elafonisos. As he waded through the shallow turquoise water, he noticed straight lines of stone just beneath the surface. Too precise, too geometric to be natural. Walls, rooms, streets. At first, he thought it was a coincidence, perhaps part of a collapsed coastal structure. But as he mapped the area, he realized he was walking through an entire city. Decades later, in the 1960s, archaeologists returned with diving equipment and underwater cameras and confirmed what Negris had found. It wasn't just a few ruins, it was an entire settlement, complete with roads, houses, courtyards, tombs, and public squares, all perfectly preserved under a thin layer of sand. Pavlopetri had been asleep beneath the Aegean for nearly 5,000 years. The site covers more than 30,000 square meters, a small city by modern standards but remarkably sophisticated for its time. Archaeologists believe it dates back to around 2800 BCE, placing it firmly in the Bronze Age, when the first great civilizations were just beginning to emerge. What makes Pavlopetri so extraordinary is how complete it is. You can still trace its streets, follow its drainage systems, walk, or rather, swim, from one house to another. Even the layout suggests careful planning, a sense of order, architecture, and community long before such ideas were supposed to exist. In many ways, Pavlopetri shouldn't be possible, and yet there it is, resting quietly under 4 meters of clear water. When divers first began documenting the site, they described the eerie sensation of swimming through time. The walls rose from the sand like ghosts, some waist-high, some taller, all weathered smooth by millennia of waves. Fish darted through ancient doorways, seagrass swayed in what were once streets. The seabed shimmered with sunlight, turning the ruins gold. There's a strange peace to it, a world preserved not by stone, but by salt and silence. Archaeologists discovered that Pavlopetri was more than a settlement. It was a trading hub. Pottery fragments revealed contact with Minoan Crete and Mycenaean Greece, 2 of the earliest advanced cultures in Europe. That means this little city may have been a crucial link in the earliest network of maritime trade. They found tools, pottery kilns, and large stone basins, evidence of textile production, perhaps dyeing or weaving. There were large rectangular buildings thought to be workshops or warehouses, and open courtyards likely used for gatherings or markets. In other words, Pavlopetri wasn't a forgotten village. It was alive, bustling, a place where people built, traded, loved, and lived. Until one day, it was gone. The cause of its sinking remains uncertain. Some scientists believe it was swallowed by an earthquake, the kind that can lift or drop entire coastlines in a single moment. Others point to gradual sea level rise as the land subsided and tides crept inward over centuries. Whatever the cause, Pavlopetri didn't die violently. It simply slipped away. The sea took it gently, one tide at a time, until homes became reefs and streets became channels, and in that stillness the city stayed, untouched, perfectly preserved beneath the quiet blue. Modern technology has allowed us to see Pavlopetri like never before. Using 3D mapping, sonar scanning, and digital modeling, researchers have reconstructed the city in virtual space. What they found was astonishing. Its streets form an organized grid, a pattern of avenues and lanes connecting clusters of homes. The houses themselves are rectangular, with multiple rooms and even what appear to be courtyards, suggesting family life, privacy, and social structure. There's even a central plaza that has a gathering space, possibly used for trade or ritual. In many ways, Pavlopetri looks like the blueprint for the cities that would come thousands of years later. It's as if civilization itself began here, quietly, by the sea. But Pavlopetri also raises a quiet question. How many more cities like this lie hidden beneath the world's oceans? For every ruin discovered, dozens remain unseen, swallowed by rising tides, buried beneath shifting sands. If Pavlopetri, so ancient and advanced, could sleep unnoticed for 5,000 years in just a few meters of water, what might rest deeper still? Whole chapters of human history could be waiting below the waves. Stories erased not by war, but by water. And perhaps that's what makes Pavlopetri so haunting, because when you swim above its walls, you're not looking at destruction. You're looking at preservation, at a world that never ended, just changed its element. The sea protects as much as it consumes. It erases the noise but keeps the shape. And in the gentle sway of seagrass and current, Pavlopetri still feels alive. Divers often say the place has a presence, a calm awareness, like a sleeping city that knows it's being watched. There's no fear, no tragedy, only the weight of memory, a sense that human stories never truly disappear. They just change form, waiting for someone to find them again. Standing or floating over Pavlopetri, it's easy to imagine what it must have looked like in its prime. Boats anchored offshore. Children running along courtyards now filled with fish. Smoke from hearths drifting toward the sky. Life, ordinary and extraordinary, unfolding on a coastline that one day would be covered by the very element it depended on. Time moves slowly underwater. Centuries pass like seconds. And as sunlight filters through the waves, it feels almost like memory itself, warm, fading but not gone. Pavlopetri is more than a ruin, it's a mirror, showing us not how little we know of history, but how much of it still waits to be rediscovered. It reminds us that the ocean isn't just the planet's greatest mystery, it's also its greatest archive. Every tide that passes above Pavlopetri carries whispers of the people who lived there. And maybe, just maybe, that's how they still exist. In the rhythm of waves, in the glimmer of light across the sea floor. As we rise once more from the waters of Greece, we leave behind this ancient city that never truly died. And yet, the sea's next secret is not so peaceful. Our next story begins with another disappearance. Not of an entire city, but of a single ship so large that its loss remains one of the most confounding maritime mysteries ever recorded. A vessel that vanished without wreckage, without survivors, without a single trace. This is the story of the USS Cyclops, the Navy's ghost ship. The sea can swallow anything, temples, cities, even memories, but nothing disappears faster than a ship. Steel, wood, and human lives all vanish into the same silence, a silence that stretches across time and tide, patient and unbroken. In the spring of 1918, that silence took a ship so large, so strong, that the world refused to believe it could simply vanish. A ship with no distress call, no debris, no survivors, nothing but absence. This is the story of the USS Cyclops, the US Navy's greatest maritime mystery. The Cyclops was enormous, more than 540 feet long, a floating giant of her age. Built to haul tons of coal and cargo, She served as the Navy's vital supply vessel during the First World War. She was powered by 2 vast engines and manned by a crew of more than 300 men. She wasn't glamorous, but she was dependable. A workhorse. And in early March 1918, she left the port of Barbados, loaded with 10,000 tons of manganese ore, a heavy black mineral used in making steel. Her destination, Baltimore, Maryland. The weather was good, her engines ran strong. The voyage should have taken 10 days, but somewhere between Barbados and the Chesapeake Bay, the Cyclops disappeared. When she failed to arrive, the Navy launched a massive search. Ships and planes scoured the Atlantic corridor, known as the Bahama Channel, an area that decades later would gain another, more famous name, the Bermuda Triangle. No oil slicks were found, no wreckage floated to shore. No distress message had ever been sent. It was as though the ocean had opened and closed around her in a single breath. 306 souls gone, the largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. Navy history. At first, officials hoped the Cyclops had suffered a mechanical breakdown and drifted somewhere out of communication range. But weeks passed, then months, still nothing. The Navy combed every possible route. Ships were diverted to retrace her path. Even coastal stations were ordered to listen for faint Morse signals. There was only static. The Cyclops had not sunk slowly. She had not burned. She had ceased to be. Theories began to form almost immediately. Some blamed German U-boats. This was wartime, after all. Perhaps she had been torpedoed. But the Germans later denied involvement, and no submarine logs ever mentioned an attack that day. Others suspected structural failure. The Cyclops had been carrying a heavy, uneven load. If the manganese shifted in rough seas, it could have caused the hull to list dangerously. A single crack might have been enough to tear her open, but no storm was recorded, and the Cyclops was built with reinforced steel. Even damaged, she should have stayed afloat long enough to signal for help. Then came the stranger ideas. Some said the ship was the victim of a giant wave, a sudden wall of water capable of swallowing vessels whole. Others spoke of magnetic anomalies, underwater volcanoes, even energy vortices, ideas that would later feed into the legend of the Bermuda Triangle. But at the time it wasn't called that. It was simply the ocean, vast, deep, and unknowable. Whatever happened to the Cyclops, it happened instantly. No one had time to send a single word. The Cyclops had one unusual feature that caught investigators' attention: her captain, George Worley. He was an experienced seaman, but not a typical officer. Born in Germany, he'd immigrated to the United States years earlier, and by all accounts was both strict and eccentric. Some crew members had complained about his temper. Rumors circulated that discipline aboard the Cyclops was collapsing. A few even claimed Worley might have been sympathetic to Germany, and that the ship had been deliberately sabotaged or handed over to the enemy. But again, no evidence was ever found. Theories multiplied, facts did not. Years later, 2 of the Cyclops' sister ships, the Proteus and the Nereus, also disappeared in the same region, each carrying metal ore, each leaving no trace. 3 identical ships lost under eerily similar circumstances. No wreckage, no survivors, only echoes. By the 1950s, these vanishings had merged into myth. Writers began calling it the Devil's Triangle. And at the heart of that legend stood the Cyclops, the ship that started it all. But behind the folklore, the mystery remains deeply human. Imagine the scene aboard her final voyage, the rhythmic thud of engines, the creak of bulkheads, the hum of voices in the mess hall. 300 men going about their duties, unaware that every sound they made would soon stop forever. No lightning, no explosion, just an ordinary morning at sea. And then, nothing. not even a ripple to mark where they'd been. The sea erases quickly. Modern researchers have tried to locate the wreck using sonar and deep-sea mapping. They've scanned thousands of square miles of seafloor, but found nothing that matches the Cyclops' size or shape. It's possible she lies miles down, buried under sediment, beyond the reach of current technology. Or perhaps she broke apart so completely that she became part of the landscape, scattered metal, indistinguishable from rock. The Atlantic is vast enough to hide anything. Some experts believe the simplest explanation is still the most likely, a catastrophic structural failure caused by metal fatigue and uneven cargo weight. If the ship fractured along the keel, she could have filled with water and sunk in minutes. In that case, there would have been no time for distress calls, only a few moments of realization before everything ended. It's grim, but it fits the silence. And yet, the Cyclops feels different, because silence that total doesn't just erase metal, it erases memory, it becomes myth. Today, the USS Cyclops remains officially missing, cause unknown. Her name lives on in plaques and naval records, but her resting place and the truth of her final moments are still lost. Somewhere beneath the calm blue of the Atlantic, she rests. Her massive hull tilted in darkness, her cargo still sealed, her clock still stopped. 300 men suspended in the same instant forever. Sometimes the sea doesn't destroy what it takes. It preserves it, like a thought held between breaths. Perhaps the Cyclops still drifts down there, whole, untouched, unseen. A ghost ship in perfect darkness, surrounded by nothing but silence and pressure. Maybe that's why her story endures. Not because of what we know, but because of what we never will. As we leave her behind, the waves seem to close a little tighter, the horizon a little farther away. Because the next mystery we meet isn't about a single ship. It's about the promise of one that was supposed to be unsinkable, and the truth the ocean taught instead. A liner called the Waratah, hailed as the Titanic of the South, vanished off the coast of Africa and was never seen again. Every ocean has its ghost ship, a vessel that leaves port and simply vanishes without storm, signal, or sound. Somewhere between departure and destination, it slips through an invisible door, leaving only speculation behind. In the early years of the 20th century, one such ship disappeared off the coast of South Africa. It was called the Waratah, a proud new passenger liner, beautiful, strong, and built to be unsinkable. And yet, just months after her maiden voyage, she was gone. Her loss remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries ever recorded, because unlike the Mary Celeste or the Cyclops, the Waratah vanished in plain sight, seen one moment, gone the next. The SS Waratah was launched in 1908, built in Scotland for the Blue Anchor Line. She was designed as both a luxury passenger ship and a cargo carrier, a miniature Titanic for the routes between Britain and Australia. At 500 feet long, with 2 tall masts and twin funnels, she was elegant but sturdy, built to cross vast distances and unpredictable seas. Her interiors were refined, rich wood, brass fittings, dining rooms lined with white linen and chandeliers. She carried first-class passengers, merchants and emigrants, people heading toward new lives beneath southern skies. Her maiden voyage was a success, but rumors followed. Some crew members whispered that the ship felt top-heavy, that her balance wasn't quite right. She rolled too easily in rough weather. Still, she sailed again. And on July 26, 1909, she left Durban, South Africa, bound for Cape Town, carrying 211 passengers and crew. None would ever be seen again. The journey began under clear skies. The Waratah steamed along the South African coast, her engines beating a steady rhythm through calm seas. Passengers played cards, wrote letters, watched the shoreline drift past. Among them were families, miners, traders, and a young woman named Jessie Broad, writing in her journal about the wonderful adventure of life at sea. Everything seemed perfect. Until the next day, when the Waratah was sighted for the last time. Around 4 p.m. on July 27th, the Clan McIntyre, another cargo ship, passed within a few miles of the Waratah. The sea was growing rough, heavy swells, a grey horizon, wind rising fast. The captain of the Clan McIntyre later reported that the Waratah appeared to be rolling heavily, but still steady on her course. Her decks were lined with passengers waving as the ships passed each other. The Waratah signalled with her flag, a simple farewell. It was the last time anyone saw her. When she failed to arrive in Cape Town, concern turned to alarm. The South African government launched one of the largest maritime searches of its time. Dozens of ships combed the coastline, scanning every bay and inlet. Telegraph stations were alerted, ports monitored, beaches searched. Nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no lifeboats, no oil slicks. It was as if the Waratah had been erased. For weeks, speculation filled newspapers across the British Empire. Some blamed a sudden rogue wave, an enormous solitary wall of water known to strike without warning. A single wave could have rolled her over completely, sinking her within minutes. Others suggested structural flaws, that her top-heavy design made her unstable in the fierce southern swells. Still others blamed the Agulhas Current, a powerful, swirling stream that runs along South Africa's coast. When high winds collide with it, the sea can turn violent in seconds. Waves twist and rise unpredictably, and a ship caught there can vanish before anyone can react. Whatever happened, it must have been quick. Too quick for distress signals or lifeboats. In those final moments, the Waratah may have rolled once, twice, and then gone down, swallowed whole. But even then, something didn't fit. A ship that large doesn't simply disappear without trace, and the ocean seemed determined to hide every sign. Months later, debris washed ashore, a piece of timber here, a cushion there, but nothing that could be proven to belong to the Waratah. Every sighting turned to rumour, every rumour to silence. Some said she'd exploded, others said she'd drifted south, lost in fog, and collided with rocks along the wild coast, where the breakers roar loud enough to drown out any cry for help. But even that coast, searched mile by mile, revealed nothing. By the time the official inquiry concluded, the Waratah had become legend. The final report offered no cause, no closure, just a line in the record: vessel lost with all hands, circumstances unknown. Theories have only multiplied since then. Some say the manganese ore in her cargo shifted suddenly, capsizing her. Others think she suffered an onboard explosion, and a few, the dreamers, the poets, believe she still sails somewhere beyond sight, trapped in a current that never ends. Over the decades, dozens of expeditions have searched for her wreck. Sonar scans, magnetometers, deep-sea submersibles, all combing the seabed between Durban and Cape Town. Several ships have been found, but not the Waratah. In 1999, marine explorer Emlyn Brown announced he had finally located her near the Baxter's Deep region, about 500 feet below the surface. He claimed the sonar image matched the liner's size and shape. But when divers returned years later, they found only an unrelated wreck, an old cargo steamer, rusted and nameless. The Waratah, it seems, still refuses to be found. Even today, more than a century later, she haunts the imagination. Writers call her the Titanic of the South, though her story is lonelier. The Titanic left wreckage, survivors, memories. The Waratah left none. It's that total absence that makes her story linger, the way she seemed to simply fall off the edge of the world. No explosion, no smoke, no trace. Only the endless blue. If you visit the coast near Durban today, the locals still talk about her. Fishermen say that on calm mornings when the mist lies low, you can sometimes see a ship-shaped shadow on the horizon, just for a moment. It never moves, it never fades properly either. It just waits until you look away. And when you look back, it's gone. Maybe it's nothing, just sunlight and sea air playing tricks, but maybe, in some strange way, the ocean remembers the shape of what it took. The Waratah's name has since come to mean more than a ship. It's become a word for the unknowable, a symbol of how fragile human certainty really is. We build, we chart, we trust the stars and compasses, but in the end, we sail across something that doesn't need to explain itself. Perhaps that's the real lesson of the Waratah, that some stories end not with answers, but with wonder. Because not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be listened to, in the slow rhythm of the waves, in the quiet between one heartbeat and the next. And as the South Atlantic fades behind us, our course turns toward another shadow of war and water. A secret fleet that never officially existed. Submarines that appeared on radar and vanished without record. Stories told by sailors who swore they saw what history says could not be there. This is the story of the phantom submarines of World War II. The sea has always been a battlefield, silent, endless, and unforgiving. But during World War II, it became something more. A theatre of shadows, where ships hunted ghosts and ghosts hunted back. Radar, sonar, and coded signals filled the waves, and beneath them, steel predators prowled in silence. Submarines. But among the countless vessels recorded in wartime logs, there are others that were never explained. Contacts that appeared and vanished, signals received from nowhere, and submarines that sank and yet were seen again. These are the phantom submarines of World War II, stories that lie somewhere between military record and maritime myth. It began with a simple mystery. In 1943, near the coast of Australia, a patrol aircraft spotted a large submarine moving through shallow waters. The area was clear of Allied subs, and Japanese records would later show none of their vessels operating there. The pilot dropped depth charges, but when the water cleared, there was nothing. No debris, no oil, no sign of a hit. The object had vanished. 2 days later, another crew reported the same sighting, in nearly the same position. Again, nothing was found. The sea, as always, was quiet. At first, officials dismissed the reports, false radar echoes, overactive imagination. But more sightings followed, different ships, different crews. Always the same description, a dark, cylindrical shape just beneath the surface, moving too slowly, too deliberately to be a whale or wreck. And then, just as suddenly, gone. The most famous of these encounters came from Scotland in 1942. A British coastal watch reported a submarine surfacing near the Firth of Clyde, a restricted military zone. Alarms sounded, patrol boats raced to intercept, but when they reached the coordinates, there was nothing but still water, no bubbles, no wake. The sonar showed something strange, a large metallic mass resting on the seabed, motionless. But when divers went down the next morning, the area was empty. The seabed was undisturbed, as if whatever was there had lifted itself away during the night. Wartime confusion explained many things: radar interference, miscommunication, enemy deception. But some stories refused to fit even those categories. In 1944, off the coast of Newfoundland, the American destroyer USS Frost reported chasing what appeared to be a German U-boat through a storm. They fired depth charges, confirmed sonar contact, and even detected metal debris. The following day, Allied command intercepted a radio signal. A a short, faint burst on a German frequency using an outdated call sign. The problem was that call sign belonged to U-530, a submarine officially reported destroyed months earlier. When the war ended, U-530 reappeared, sailing calmly into an Argentine port, intact and unharmed. Its crew refused to explain where they'd been. They simply said they'd been on orders. Stories like this multiplied after the war. In the Pacific, fishermen spoke of strange metallic shapes beneath their boats, long and slow, like sleeping beasts. Divers exploring wreck sites reported hearing distant, rhythmic knocking sounds echoing through the hulls of sunken ships. Some claimed to have seen lights, steady, white glows far below the reach of daylight, moving horizontally across the ocean floor. In 1946, off the coast of Norway, a British trawler snagged something in its nets. When it surfaced, it wasn't a fish. It was the rusted conning tower of a submarine. But its markings were unknown. No number, no flag, no nation. Before it could be examined, the vessel broke loose and sank again. No one ever found it. To this day, historians and naval experts debate what these phantom submarines really were. Some believe they were experimental prototypes, secret weapons that never made it into official records, stealth subs, early sonar-resistant hulls, or test vessels operating in isolation. Others argue they were misidentified wrecks already lying on the seabed, mistaken by radar as living objects. But there's another theory, one whispered among divers and old sailors, that some of these submarines didn't belong to any side. It sounds impossible, yet the sea leaves room for imagination. In the late stages of the war, as Germany's naval operations crumbled, several U-boats were ordered on secret missions across the Atlantic. Some carried gold, others scientists, others, according to rumor, special cargo. Not all of them were accounted for. Witnesses claimed that after Germany's surrender, a handful of U-boats continued to patrol, surfacing near remote coasts, submerging again before they could be approached. It was as if they hadn't received the message that the war was over. Or perhaps they had, and simply chose not to return. In 1968, long after the war, the US Navy conducted a classified operation called Sand Dollar, searching for a lost submarine in the North Atlantic. During the mission, sonar picked up faint metallic sounds deep below. The signals didn't match the missing sub's specifications. They matched older models, the same patterns used by German U-boats from the 1940s. The coordinates were cross-checked with wartime records. No wreck existed in that region. The area was never explored again. Science, of course, offers easier answers. Submarine detection is notoriously unreliable. Temperature layers, salinity, and pressure can all bend sound in strange ways. A whale can look like a steel hull on sonar. A shipwreck can seem to move if current shifts just right. But for those who served at sea, men who knew the difference between a wave and a vessel, the unexplained remains stubborn. Many describe the same eerie feeling, the sense of being watched from below, of something vast and intelligent moving through the dark. They'd listen to the ocean through hydrophones and swear they heard engines, faint, mechanical, but pulsing like a heartbeat. And then silence, the kind that makes you hold your breath without knowing why. If you dive deep enough in certain parts of the Atlantic today, you'll still find wrecks from that era. Rusted steel giants resting in endless blackness, their hatches sealed, their periscopes pointing upward toward a surface they'll never reach again. But among them there are gaps, places where ships should be, but aren't. Vessels listed as lost, presumed sunk, yet never found. Coordinates marked on maps but empty when searched. It's as if the ocean keeps a few for itself. The phantom submarines of World War II remind us that even the most documented war in history still has its secrets. That beneath the precision of sonar and radar lies something older. An ocean that doesn't care for our certainty. Somewhere down there, in trenches too deep for light, machines built by men rest beside the bones of empires. And maybe, just maybe, one or two of them still move. Still glide through the black water, their lights off, their engines low, following orders long forgotten by the world above. Because if there's one thing the sea teaches us, it's this. Not everything that sinks stays still. And as we leave these ghosts of steel behind, the waves carry us onward to a smaller ship, a simpler mystery, but one no less haunting. A yacht found adrift off the coast of Australia, its table set for lunch, its crew vanished without a trace. This is the story of the Kaz II, the modern ghost ship. The ocean doesn't need centuries to make a mystery. It can do it in a single afternoon. One wave, one gust of wind, one quiet mistake. And a story is born that no one can finish. In the spring of 2007, off the coast of Australia, a sleek white yacht called the Kaz II was found drifting aimlessly across the Coral Sea. Her sails were up, her engines still running. A meal sat neatly on the table, but her three-man crew gone. No distress call, no damage, no sign of struggle. Just the strange, steady silence of an empty boat, still doing its job long after the people were gone. The Kaz II had set out from Airlie Beach in Queensland on April 15, 2007. A short, pleasant voyage, about 500 miles north to Townsville, along one of the most beautiful stretches of ocean on Earth. The men aboard, Derek Batten, Peter Tunstead, and James Tunstead, were all experienced sailors, close friends in their 50s and 60s. They weren't thrill-seekers or adventurers. They were careful, methodical, steady, the kind of men who checked weather reports twice and tied every knot properly. It was supposed to be a relaxing trip, a few days of sea, sun, and conversation. But within 72 hours, the Kaz II would become one of the most haunting maritime mysteries of the modern age. On April 20th, a helicopter from the Australian Coast Guard spotted the yacht drifting about 100 nautical miles off Townsville. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. The Kaz II was moving calmly, its sails half-trimmed, its course steady. But when they radioed the vessel, there was no reply. They circled lower. No movement on deck. No one at the helm. A boarding party was dispatched. When they stepped aboard, it was like walking into a photograph frozen in time. The cabin was spotless. A laptop was open and running. A newspaper dated April 15th lay neatly folded beside it. Cups and plates sat on the table, lunch still half-eaten. Fishing lines dangled over the stern, one of them snagged, pulling slightly against the water. The engine was on, quietly idling. The radio worked, all the life jackets were accounted for, and yet there wasn't a soul aboard. The men had simply vanished. Investigators examined everything, the GPS logs, the sails, the rigging. Nothing pointed to foul play. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a storm. The Kaz II had been sailing smoothly for days after its crew disappeared, the autopilot holding course. According to the GPS data, the last manual entry was made on April 16th, just one day after departure. After that, the system recorded steady motion, a perfect lonely line northward through calm seas. 3 men had set out together, and sometime within the first 24 hours, they had all gone overboard. The investigation quickly became an international curiosity. Headlines called it the Ghost Yacht. People compared it to the Mary Celeste, calling it her modern twin. But unlike that 19th century ship, the Kaz II wasn't lost in the middle of the Atlantic. She was found in broad daylight, her systems running perfectly. The question was simple. How could 3 grown men vanish from a yacht in calm weather without leaving a single trace? The first theory was foul play. Pirates, perhaps, or smugglers. But there was no sign of robbery, no struggle, and no motive. The men weren't carrying cash or valuables, and their route stayed close to the Australian coast. The second theory was accident. Maybe one man fell overboard, and the other 2 jumped in to rescue him. A chain reaction of good intentions that ended in tragedy. It made sense, especially since one fishing line was tangled in the stern. Maybe one of them leaned too far to untangle it. But if that happened, why didn't anyone grab a life jacket or drop the sails? Why did the engine stay running? And even if all 3 fell in, the sea was calm. Their yacht would have drifted nearby. They could have easily climbed back aboard. Unless something else went wrong. Another theory focused on sailing mechanics. Investigators noted that one sail was torn and another badly twisted. Perhaps a sudden gust of wind, what sailors call a boom swing, caught one of them off guard, knocking him into the water. The others rushed to help, and the yacht's automatic steering kept it moving slowly forward, just far enough to escape them. The Kaz too could have drifted away silently, engines humming, leaving them behind. In that scenario, the men would have treaded water, watching helplessly as their boat, and their safety, slipped over the horizon. No one heard them call. No one saw them vanish. It's a small detail, but on the open ocean, small details are everything. The last credible theory came from oceanographic analysis. Researchers discovered that around the time of the disappearance, unpredictable tidal currents had been sweeping through the area. It's possible the men underestimated the pull of the sea. Even strong swimmers can't fight a current like that for long, and within minutes they would have been out of sight of the deck. Their bodies were never found. What makes the Kaz 2 so haunting isn't just what happened. It's how ordinary everything looked afterward. There was no violence, no panic, no chaos. Just an unfinished lunch, a humming engine, and a horizon that offered no answers. Forensic investigators said it was one of the most unsettling scenes they'd ever encountered. Everything was right, except for the people. It was as if they'd stepped out for a moment and forgotten to come back. Today, the Kaz 2 sits as both a cautionary tale and a riddle. Her story has been reconstructed, debated, and fictionalized countless times. But in the end, all the explanations still leave a gap. A pause between fact and fate that refuses to close. Because that's the thing about ocean mysteries. The deeper you search, the more the sea reminds you that it doesn't owe you closure. It doesn't answer questions, it just absorbs them. Maybe the 3 friends were victims of bad luck, or a split-second mistake. Or maybe, like so many others before them, they became part of the ocean's quiet collection. Stories that float just beneath the surface, visible only to memory. If you stand at Airlie Beach today, you can still see the same stretch of blue where they disappeared. The water sparkles, the horizon is infinite, and everything feels too calm to hold a secret. But out there, where the current bends and the light turns green, their story lingers. Not as tragedy, but as echo. 3 men, 1 yacht, and a silence so perfect it feels intentional. The Kaz 2 reminds us that even in the age of GPS and radar, the ocean hasn't changed. It still hides what it wants to. It still waits. And sometimes it still takes. As we drift away from this quiet ghost of modern waters, our journey carries us into a different kind of mystery. Not loss, but legend. A ship that carried one of the world's greatest treasures, gold, gems and relics, and vanished into a storm so fierce that centuries later, divers still dream of finding it. This is the story of the treasure of the Flor de la Mar. The ocean has always been a thief. It steals quietly, gold, ships, voices, even time. But every once in a while it steals something so vast, so glittering, that people never stop looking for it. The story of the Flor de la Mar, or Flower of the Sea, begins not in mystery, but in triumph, and ends in one of the greatest treasures ever lost to the deep. A ship that vanished 5 centuries ago carrying more wealth than any vessel before or since. A ship that still hasn't been found. The Flor de la Mar was built in 1502 in Lisbon, Portugal, a grand 3-masted carrack, the pride of an empire rising on the winds of exploration. She was meant to carry silk, spices and gold from the newly claimed colonies in Asia back to Europe. At over 400 tons, she was one of the largest ships of her time, elegant, powerful and nearly unsinkable. Nearly. Her captain was Afonso de Albuquerque, a man as ambitious as the empire he served. Under his command, the Flor de la Mar sailed east, part of a fleet sent to expand Portuguese power across the Indian Ocean. But this wasn't just trade, it was conquest. In 1511, Albuquerque led a daring assault on the Sultanate of Malacca on the Malay Peninsula, one of the richest ports in the world. Malacca was the heart of the spice trade, a crossroads where merchants from China, India, Arabia, and Africa met. Whoever controlled it controlled the flow of wealth across half the world. When the city fell, Albuquerque seized everything: jewels, ivory, gold, silver, and relics from palaces and temples. By all accounts, it was an unimaginable fortune, so vast that even his soldiers joked the treasure would sink the ships before they ever left port. And among those ships, the Flor de la Mar carried the greatest share. Albuquerque planned to send the treasure back to Portugal as a royal gift to King Manuel I, proof that the empire's reach now extended to the edges of the known world. But fate, as always, has its own sense of irony. In November of 1511, as the Flor de la Mar began her voyage home, she entered the Strait of Malacca, a narrow channel between Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, known for its violent storms and hidden reefs. The monsoon season had begun. The crew begged Albuquerque to wait. He refused. He wanted to return before word of his conquests spread. The decision sealed the ship's fate. On a moonless night, caught in the grip of a raging storm, the Flor de la Mar struck a reef. Waves slammed her hull, tearing open her sides. Water poured in. The masts snapped, the cargo shifted, and within moments the ship began to break apart. Albuquerque and a handful of crew survived, washed ashore, clinging to fragments of the wreck. Hundreds of others drowned. And with them, the treasure sank into the sea, vanishing into a storm of sand and silt that swallowed gold as easily as it swallowed men. For days afterward, wreckage washed onto the shores of Sumatra. Barrels, broken chests, shattered planks. But the treasure itself was gone. Every effort to recover it failed. Divers sent into the currents were pulled away or killed. The reefs were too sharp, the waters too deep, and the monsoon too relentless. The Flor de la Mar became more than a wreck. It became a wound in history. An entire empire's fortune gone in a single night. And what a fortune it was. According to chroniclers of the time, the cargo included hundreds of gold bars and coins, mountains of gemstones, carved ivory, silks and pearls, royal gifts from conquered rulers, including the golden throne of the Sultan of Malacca. Some modern historians estimate its value at over $2 billion today. But how do you measure the worth of legend? Because as the centuries passed, the story of the Flor de la Mar grew richer than any gold could ever be. Treasure hunters began searching for her as early as the 16th century. Portuguese explorers tried and failed. Later came the Dutch, the British, and eventually Modern marine salvagers armed with sonar, submersibles, and satellite maps. Every generation claims to be close to finding her. Every generation fails. The sea near Sumatra is treacherous, a labyrinth of reefs and shifting sandbanks. Earthquakes and tsunamis have rearranged the seafloor countless times since 1511. Even if the Flor de la Mar survived in part, she may now be buried under layers of sediment, her cargo scattered across miles. It's possible she no longer exists at all. And yet, the legend refuses to sink. Some divers claim to have found coins near the Strait of Malacca, bearing Portuguese markings. Others say they've seen cannons, anchors, or pieces of carved wood that could have belonged to her, but nothing definitive, nothing that matches the scale of the treasure she carried. It's almost as if the ocean is guarding it, and perhaps it is. Because the Flor de la Mar wasn't just a ship of wealth, it was a ship of conquest. Its treasure was taken, not given. And maybe, in some quiet, poetic way, the sea was simply returning balance, taking back what men had stolen. Even now, more than 500 years later, expeditions still set out, scanning the waters around Indonesia and Malaysia, chasing the shimmer of a promise that never fades. No one knows exactly where she lies, but everyone has a theory. Some say she rests near Sumatra's northern coast. Others claim the wreck lies in Portuguese Timor or even Java. And every so often, when a storm stirs the seabed and golden light filters through the water, someone swears they've seen the glint of treasure beneath the sand, just for a second before the waves hide it again. Maybe the Flor de la Mar will never be found. Maybe she's meant to stay lost, her gold melted by salt, her throne claimed by coral, her beauty dissolved into myth. Because sometimes what we can't find lasts longer than what we can. The legend becomes the treasure, and the ocean, as always, keeps the best stories for itself. The tale of the Flor de la Mar isn't just about riches lost. It's about what happens when human greed meets the infinite patience of the sea. Empires rise, ships sail, and treasure is chased, but the ocean doesn't care for ownership. It keeps what it takes, and it never gives receipts. And perhaps that's why this story still glitters in the dark. Not because of what's buried below, but because of what it says about us. Our endless need to search, even when the horizon tells us to rest. As the currents close over the lost flower of the sea, we sail toward waters equally strange. A place where the ocean itself seems alive, where ships vanish and compasses spin, and where the boundary between natural and supernatural blurs completely. This is the story of the Devil's Sea, the Pacific's own Bermuda Triangle. The ocean has many faces, calm, cruel, and curious, but there are certain places where it feels almost alive, where compasses falter, ships disappear, and logic itself seems to lose its way. Sailors have always whispered about such places, zones where the sea behaves strangely, as if something unseen stirs beneath the surface. The Bermuda Triangle is one, but on the far side of the world there is another, a place where the Pacific meets its own reflection. They call it the Devil's Sea. It lies off the coast of Japan between Tokyo and the Bonin Islands, stretching roughly to Guam, a patch of ocean known locally as the Dragon's Triangle. It's one of the most heavily trafficked shipping zones on Earth, but it's also a place with a reputation centuries old for ships that vanish, lights that move beneath the water, and sudden storms that rise out of nowhere. The Japanese call it Ma no Umi, the Sea of the Devil, a name born not from myth, but from memory. Long before modern records, fishermen spoke of strange whirlpools appearing without warning. Boats would be pulled under. No sound, no splash, just gone. Others returned with stories of glowing shapes beneath their hulls, like lanterns drifting deep below. And sometimes, they said, the sea itself would rumble, a sound like distant thunder rising from the ocean floor. These tales passed from generation to generation, dismissed as superstition, until the 20th century, when modern ships began disappearing too. In the 1950s, Japanese authorities officially designated the area as dangerous after a string of disappearances baffled even the Navy. The most famous was the Kaiyo Maru No. 5, a 140-foot research vessel sent to study volcanic activity in the region. On September 24, 1952, it set sail with a crew of 31 scientists and sailors. Their mission? To investigate a new undersea volcano forming near Miyake Island. The last radio message from the ship was calm, a simple weather report. Then, silence. Days passed. Search planes flew over the area but found nothing. No debris, no oil slick, no signal. The Kaiyo Maru had vanished. All 31 aboard were declared lost. The incident sparked nationwide headlines. Japan's Maritime Safety Agency launched a full-scale investigation. They concluded that the ship may have been caught in an underwater eruption, a rare event where volcanic gases suddenly displace water, creating a violent implosion. In seconds, a ship could be pulled under with no trace. But the explanation didn't satisfy everyone. The volcano had since quieted, and other vessels reported strange conditions, compasses spinning wildly, sudden shifts in current, eerie green lights below. It was enough for the legend of the Devil's Sea to return, stronger than ever. Reports of missing ships and aircraft continued through the 1950s and 60s. Fishing boats, small cargo vessels, even military craft, all gone without warning. Sometimes wreckage washed up days later, charred or twisted, as if scorched from within, sometimes not even that. Japanese sailors began leaving offerings before passing through, coins, food, paper charms, hoping to appease whatever power ruled the waters there. It wasn't fear exactly, it was respect. An understanding that the sea has moods, and this one especially should not be provoked. By the late 20th century, Western writers had begun to compare the Devil's Sea to the Bermuda Triangle. Some said they were opposite mirrors, both roughly equidistant from the equator, both sites of magnetic anomalies, both swallowing ships with silent precision. Others claimed the area sat above an underwater energy vortex, a place where gravitational fields distort and electromagnetic waves bend. Science, as usual, offered simpler reasons. The waters of the Devil's Sea sit atop a volatile region of the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most geologically unstable areas on Earth. Underwater volcanoes, earthquakes, and methane gas eruptions are all common there. Such forces can easily create phenomena that mimic the supernatural, bubbles reducing buoyancy, bursts of light from friction and gas ignition, magnetic interference from volcanic minerals. And yet, even with explanations, the unease remains, because these waters don't just cause accidents, they attract them. In 1980, a Japanese freighter reported seeing a red wall rise from the sea, a pillar of flame and mist that seemed to hang in the air. In 1989, a fishing trawler found an abandoned lifeboat floating near Iwo Jima, perfectly intact, with food, water, and charts still on board. But no sign of the crew it had belonged to. And in 1990, sonar scans near the Bonin Islands recorded what appeared to be massive, moving objects deep below the seafloor. Metallic echoes that changed direction and speed, too precise to be geological. The official reports are cautious, but sailors still talk, and they all say the same thing: the dragon sleeps there. For centuries, Japanese folklore has told of Ryujin, the dragon god of the sea, a vast serpentine being who ruled the tides and guarded a hidden palace beneath the waves. It's said he controlled storms and earthquakes, and that his palace shimmered with coral and pearl. Those who entered without permission were never seen again. In the minds of many, Ryujin's domain overlaps perfectly with the Devil's Sea, a spiritual explanation for a physical mystery. Science and myth circling each other like currents. Today, satellite navigation and modern technology have made the area safer. Ships still pass through it daily and planes fly overhead. Yet every so often a signal drops, a radar blip vanishes, or a boat fails to arrive. And the old stories rise again. Not because people believe in dragons, but because they recognize something deeper. That sense of smallness in the face of the unknown, that quiet, ancient awe. The Devil's Sea is a reminder that the ocean is not ours to understand, only to respect. It hides volcanoes that breathe fire underwater, trenches that stretch deeper than mountains are tall, and currents that move with the patience of centuries. We chart it, we study it, but it remains untamed. And perhaps that's the real heart of this mystery. Not monsters, not curses, not energy fields, but the humbling truth that the world still has places that don't explain themselves. If you listen closely, even the calmest sea carries a pulse, a low, steady rhythm that feels almost alive. Maybe that's the ocean's heartbeat, or maybe it's the echo of everything it's taken and kept. From the Fleur de la Mar's treasure to the vanished ships of the Devil's Sea, each story is just another ripple in that vast, unknowable body, one we can sail across, but never truly comprehend. And as we leave behind these haunted waters of the Pacific, we dive once more into the world's final frontier, deeper, darker, and quieter than anywhere else on Earth, where sunlight fades completely and sound itself seems afraid to travel. A place so cold and immense, it feels like another planet. This is the story of the Ningen, and the giants said to swim beneath the ice. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets. Sound fades first, swallowed by pressure, then light, then color, until all that's left is motion, slow, patient, almost unseen. In the deep ocean, life doesn't stop. It adapts, it stretches, grows, evolves into forms that look more like dreams than creatures. And in the frozen waters of the Antarctic, there are stories of something so vast, so pale, that it blurs the line between biology and myth. They call it the Ningen, the human. The first reports came from Japanese whaling ships in the late 20th century. Sailors described seeing enormous white shapes gliding beneath the ice. At first, they thought they were whales. But whales don't have arms, and these did. The shapes were said to be 40 to 90 feet long, humanoid in outline with smooth, pale skin and no visible eyes. Some claimed to see 5-fingered hands reaching toward the surface before vanishing into the dark. Others spoke of faces, blank, featureless but somehow aware. No one could explain it, but no one forgot it either. The name Ningen caught on quickly, a Japanese word meaning human used because the creatures looked disturbingly familiar. Not alien, not monstrous, just wrongly human. Photographs began circulating online in the early 2000s. Grainy, low-resolution images taken from research vessels near the South Pole. In one, a vast white form appears under the ice, arms spread wide, body tapering to a fin. In another, something rises briefly from the water, like a face, featureless but unmistakably shaped like ours. Most of these images have been dismissed. Tricks of light, ice formations, or digital hoaxes. And yet, for those who work in polar seas, the unease remains. Because when you spend enough time on the edge of the world, you learn that not everything down there wants to be seen. Science, of course, has its explanations. Biologists suggest that Ningen sightings could be giant rays, unknown species of squid, or even deformed icebergs shifting beneath the current. The Antarctic is full of optical illusions, mirages born from refraction, pressure, and the mind struggle to recognize shape in darkness. But there's something deeper behind these stories, because the idea of enormous unseen life isn't fantasy, it's fact. The deep ocean is home to gigantism, a phenomenon where species grow to extraordinary size to survive the crushing pressure and cold. At depths below 2 miles, where light never reaches, familiar creatures become enormous. There are giant isopods, cousins of woodlice the size of puppies, colossal squids longer than buses with eyes the size of dinner plates. Even jellyfish and worms grow to surreal proportions, their translucent bodies drifting like curtains in an eternal night. Scientists call it deep-sea gigantism, an evolutionary response to scarcity and isolation. The colder and darker it gets, the bigger life seems to become. No one knows exactly why. Maybe slower metabolisms allow for greater growth. Maybe limited predators let creatures evolve unchecked. Or maybe in a world where energy is everything, size itself becomes a kind of adaptation, a body large enough to store warmth and endurance. Whatever the reason, the deeper we look, the stranger it gets. In 2003, a Japanese research team exploring near the Ross Sea captured sonar readings of something massive moving beneath the ice shelf. Over 90 meters long, swimming too slowly for any known whale. They never confirmed what it was. The data was labeled unidentified biological mass and filed away. A year later, in 2004, the crew of another vessel reported seeing a pale form surface near midnight. Silent, still, and vast. They said it moved like fabric in water, not muscle. When their floodlights turned toward it, it sank without a sound. One sailor described it later as the shape of a ghost pretending to be alive. The ocean below the Antarctic remains one of the least explored regions on Earth. Beneath miles of ice lie subglacial lakes, sealed off from sunlight for millions of years. Some of them, like Lake Vostok, hold entire ecosystems we've never seen. Microbes, possibly small animals, maybe more. If gigantism thrives in darkness, what might have evolved down there, hidden from sight and time? Creatures not alien, but ancient. Older than whales, older than us, shaped by pressure and ice into something unrecognizable. The Ningen could be myth, yes, but myths often begin with truth, a glimpse, a shadow, a question that never finds an answer. There's something poetic about how the story of the Ningen feels more like a whisper than a report. No evidence, no bones, just a feeling shared by those who've seen too much water and too little light. It's not the monster that fascinates people. It's the possibility, because we want to believe that the world is still bigger than our maps, that there are still corners untouched by certainty. The Ningen, real or not, represents that, a reminder that the ocean still keeps its secrets well. Deep-sea gigantism proves that size itself is no longer limited by imagination. Every expedition seems to find something larger, stranger, softer, or older than expected. Creatures that glow, that fold, that seem to breathe the darkness itself. Some scientists call the abyss Earth's final wilderness. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's the planet's memory, a place where everything forgotten still exists, just deeper, slower, quieter. Down there, the rules of life change, and so does our definition of real. The truth is, we've explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. The rest remains unseen, unreachable, unknowable. For all our technology, we are still blind to most of our own planet. Maybe the Ningen is just a trick of the mind. Or maybe it's what the deep shows us when we look too long. Something shaped like us, but stripped of identity. A mirror, not a monster. The human form, swallowed by the sea, given back as something else. When you stand on the edge of Antarctica and look out into that endless grey, the sky bleeding into the ice, the sea into the horizon. It's easy to believe in things you can't prove, because everything there feels alive, even the silence breathes. And maybe that's all the Ningen really is, the ocean's reflection of us. Vast, pale, unfinished, drifting through the dark, trying to be seen. As we rise from the depths and return to the surface, the world feels smaller again, brighter, louder, almost too awake. But below us, that quiet realm remains untouched, patient, eternal, waiting for the next diver, the next camera, the next question. Because as long as we keep asking what's down there, the ocean will keep answering with silence. And so we leave behind the frozen shadows and surface once more, carrying with us the same truth we began with, that the sea is not just water and salt, but memory. Every wreck, every legend, every whisper beneath the waves is part of the same story, the one we'll never fully know. For now the deep sleeps, but its mysteries are awake. The ocean never forgets. It holds everything, every ship, every life, every sound that's ever touched it. It remembers the weight of oars and anchors, the hum of engines, the silence after storms. It remembers us, even when we forget ourselves. And maybe that's what makes its mysteries feel eternal, because the sea doesn't erase, it keeps. For hours now we've wandered through its depths, through ruins and wrecks, vanished fleets and lost cities, creatures that defy belief and shadows that refuse to explain themselves. We've followed the trails of explorers and sailors, scientists and dreamers, all chasing the same question that no one can ever answer completely. What lies beneath? But the deeper we've gone, the more the question has changed. It's no longer what's down there, it's why we need to know, because maybe the truth isn't hiding in the sea at all. Maybe it's hiding in us. There's a strange comfort in knowing that some things will always remain unexplained, that even in a world mapped by satellites and sonar, there are still blank spaces, places that resist definition, stories that end mid-sentence, the fleur de la mar glittering beneath the sand, the San Juan resting in silence, the Cyclops vanished without a ripple, the Waratah gone in a calm sea, each one a different mystery, but somehow all the same. All reminders that the ocean doesn't just hold secrets, it is one. Maybe that's why we keep returning to it, why we tell and retell its stories. Not to solve them, but to stand beside them, to feel small again, to remember what it's like to be in awe. Because the sea humbles us. It reminds us that no matter how far we've come, with our technology, our science, our searchlights that reach the bottom of the world, there will always be more we don't understand. And that's not failure, that's beauty. Somewhere tonight, a ship crosses the same waters where others vanished centuries ago. A diver descends into a trench where light has never been. A whale sings into the dark, its voice echoing through hundreds of miles of ocean, heard by no one, yet felt by everything. And far below, among ruins and bones and sand, the sea keeps its gentle watch, unbothered by our questions. It doesn't guard its mysteries out of malice, it simply is deep, patient, eternal. The ocean has always been a mirror, one that reflects our greatest fears and our quietest hopes. We look into it and see the unknown. But maybe, if we look long enough, we're only seeing our own reflection. Curiosity, courage, longing, loss. The same emotions that built ships, wrote legends, and sent us chasing the horizon in the first place. It's not the monsters or the vanishings that stay with us. It's the feeling, that vastness, that peace, that reminder that even in a world full of answers, mystery still exists. And maybe that's what the ocean has been trying to tell us all along. That not everything needs to be found to be real, not every truth needs to surface. Some belong to the deep, where silence says more than words ever could. Because when the sea takes something, it doesn't destroy it. It transforms it. Wood becomes coral. Metal becomes reef. Stories become legends. And legends, they never drown. So as our journey comes to a close, take a breath. Let the waves slow your thoughts. The mysteries you've heard tonight, they don't ask for answers. They ask only to be remembered. Because the ocean, vast as it is, remembers everything that touches it. Every ship, every whisper, every dream that sank into its depths. And now, it remembers us too. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, picture that horizon. Endless, dark, and calm. Somewhere beyond it, the waves move over ruins older than time, through trenches deeper than imagination, past creatures we've never seen. The sea breathes, the world sleeps, and history hums beneath the tide. The ocean doesn't end, it just gets quieter. And as you close your eyes, remember, the sea keeps its promises by keeping its silence. And somewhere, beneath miles of water, the oldest story in the world is still being written. Good night.